Hello, and welcome to another episode of the CIRS Group podcast. I am Barbara.
And I'm JC.
And today we are going to talk about another aspect of our CIRSx recap. We have done a part 1 and part 2 general recap videos, so you can go check those out. We've done one on remediation. So that's fixing a building that sucks. Now we're going to talk about building or finding a good environment or home. And that's a little bit of a different process. And there are a couple talks on the building a good home that we will cover, as well as one great talk from a realtor about finding a good home. And I thought they were all really helpful.
100%. And before we jump into the talks, just a quick disclaimer that Barbara and I are not medical professionals. We are CIRS patients. We run a CIRS support community. We've read the textbook. We went to CIRSx, which is the big CIRS conference. So we are knowledgeable about these topics, but none of this should be taken as medical advice.
Yep. Always consult your CIRS certified practitioner.
The first talk was Why Buildings Fail to Protect Our Health. And this was by Paula Baker LaPorte. She is an architect and she is super knowledgeable. I think of all the talks, I took the most notes for this talk.
Yeah, I've got pages for sure. She was great. She opened her talk talking a lot about like why homes are so bad. Um like just in general, by code, like government enforced code requires buildings to be built a certain way, and those ways happen to be really friendly to mold, unfortunately, between like the drywall that we use, which is basically mold food, the fact that in the United States especially, we don't build buildings to last. Things, we all move around a lot, move from home to home, like just generally speaking, like our culture is different than, let's say, in Europe, where you have buildings that are like hundreds, if not thousands of years old in some cases. So we have a very different viewpoint on the building a home process here in the United States. And it's not great for what we want as CIRS patients.
100%. And she mentioned there's three major causes of home toxicity, one being chemical, two being mold, and then three being electromagnetic radiation. And she brought up a really interesting point of like, if you are sensitive to electromagnetic radiation, it's really hard to get away from that in a home environment. And I've talked about this with other people who have CIRS. I think when you have CIRS and you realize like your home is making you sick, it puts homeless people in a totally different light because
Mm.
it's like I'm sure people like become homeless for many different reasons, but now having the context of CIRS, I think to myself like, what if these people have just realized that their home is making them sick and they feel better outside of their home? Like, I wonder how many homeless people out there have that experience.
I would imagine at least 25%, if not more, if I had to guess.
25% is the percentage of people that have the haplotypes to have CIRS. Just putting that
Yeah.
joke into context.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, JC. It was necessary.
So she did say that there's 6 reasons homes are mold prone. One being light frame construction. It always fails when it's wet. Two is we don't invest in longevity, like Barbara was saying. Three is that codes cause wet walls. There's something called a vapor barrier that's necessary in homes and causes mold. Four was we build with mold food. Five was that standard finishes trap moisture. And then six was that HVAC can become contaminated and, oh,
Distribute.
yes, HVAC becomes a contamination and distribution network. And I don't know why this made me think of like 2319 Monsters Inc. But it's like when they have the people like come down from the ceiling in the hazmat suits, it's like your HVAC is spreading those children's socks throughout your house.
Yeah. Yep. That is a perfect analogy for that.
Paula also shared the 4 major sources of mold, one being that buildings that get wet. Two is wet building processes during construction. I used to live in Florida and we would watch these homes be built over months and months during monsoon season, which is basically all seasons in Florida. And it was just, they weren't tarped, they weren't covered. It was just bare timber being exposed to wet constantly, never drying out. Three is condensation, and she brought up that vapor barrier again. And then four is plumbing malfunctions. And four is the one that I would think of as being like the major contributor to water damage, is like having a plumbing malfunction. But if your home is being constructed and it's getting wet and the mold is building at that time, it's like, well, you're down before you even started.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, and you would think that some places that are a little drier would be safe from this, but I personally witnessed some horrific instances of lots of rain on a construction site in Southern California. Again, not a lot of rain that happens in Southern California, but just enough. And just enough that people don't know what to do when it happens. Take driving, for example. If you live in an area where everyone forgets how to drive as soon as some water falls from the sky, chances are the construction crews in those areas also don't know what to do when some water falls from the sky. So those are sources of moisture, and there are ways to build resistance to those sources, which is to protect the friggin' building during construction. Like you said, tarping it. There are companies and products out there that are meant to protect the framing of a building before a roof is built on it. You could build a roof sooner as soon as you possibly can. Put the roof on of the what you're building. Um, just manage the climate naturally. Pick a better time of year to build is another option. Make things watertight, and don't use mold food. Don't fricking use drywall. Why are we still using drywall? There's got to be a better way.
She also mentioned that the Southeast in the US is a challenging building climate. And when there was the Q&A panel, I asked her, I was like, you said the Southeast is the worst. What is the best? And she said that there's really no great answer to that. Because even if you're building in the Southwest, like Barbara said, if it does rain, they may not have the practices in place that they would in other areas of the country to deal with that. She said it's more about being aware of where you're building and then kind of having a building specific approach to that building in that climate.
Right. That was something I think she mentioned during her talk. Like, let's say the UK is relatively good at building in the rain, because guess what? It's always freaking raining there. So you have to get good at doing that. So I think that's, yeah, something to keep in mind as well.
She also mentioned having, if you are building a home, in the contract for the building, having codes of conduct, cleaning protocols, acceptable products, where to buy them, have test procedures throughout the building process, and then have the owner and the consultant interfacing before the walls are covered. I thought that was really interesting because I think when you're looking at building a home, it's like you're looking for a builder who can meet your specifications, but this is like another layer of like, yes, you're building my home, but you're building me a safe home. And we should have mentioned this earlier, but she does have a book that she co-wrote, and I don't remember the other author, but it's called Prescriptions for a Healthy House. And she also mentioned that her book sales have been growing recently, specifically, which is showing that there's this growing interest in people wanting to build these homes that are safer environments to live in.
Yeah. And I don't know how many people in our audience have ever built their own home, but oftentimes there is an owner representative. It is a hired professional individual who is knowledgeable about the building process, but is hired by the owner to go head to head with the general contractor and make sure the general contractor does what they're supposed to do. There's usually an owner representative on every construction site, commercial, residential, and everything else. So that is a perfect position for that person, at least, to know what the heck CIRS is and to know what building practices are the best to ensure a proper building of a house. And so that would be the role that you would want to fill most carefully. You want a really good advocate for you and your health in that position of owner representative.
She also mentioned for different climate conditions, there's some things that you can do to try and mitigate mold growth during construction. One is build indoors and then assemble on site, kind of like a prefab home.
Mhm.
And then two, to use protection, so some sort of tarping. Three is to use inorganic material, so again, avoid mold food. And then four is to test and then remediate if needed before doing the framing and sheathing conceals. So before putting the actual walls on, make sure that the timber that you had in place in the beginning wasn't moldy.
Yeah, and there should be some kind of arrival location that is safe for all the materials being used and stored while they're not being used yet in the building of your home. So you just want that area to be mold free and continue to verify that. Keep everything elevated off of the ground if it needs to be. Just keep it out of the weather, all of that fun stuff. Similar to how you might clean your own contents of your house, where you take it to some place outside where you can clean things and keep things in plastic bins. You would want to do something similar with the actual building supplies, not keeping it in bins necessarily, but keeping it in. Her suggestion was like a big like almost like a pod, or like one of those big, what word am I trying to come up with here? I don't
Storage
even know.
container?
Thank you. You're like the obvious one, Barbara.
No,
What happened to
just,
your
I
brain?
was like, that's, it can't possibly be that.
No, I mean, I think that was the picture that she showed in her talk, was like a giant, a storage container, what you would see on the back of a semi truck on the freeway,
Mm.
just a big holding container that is airtight, or not airtight, but weatherproof, and that you can put everything in there and seal it up. But yeah,
She
that's
also,
all I have.
and we talk about this a lot, is like hard versus easy mode on when you have stairs. It's like you can make choices that make your life easier. And so choosing not to have a crawl space, choosing not to have a basement, choosing those inorganic building materials are all choices you can make to live life on easier mode. And then she started talking about the plumbing failure damage prevention. And I thought that these were helpful because these are things you could do now, regardless of whether or not you're building. But like having a floor drain near water appliances or water loss detectors, you can actually buy they're little devices you can put near any sort of plumbing, and it'll alert you if you start having some sort of a leak, and you can put them like under your sink and next to your water heater and stuff like that. If you're building, you can also install shut off devices. So if a leak is detected, it'll just automatically shut everything off. But I was looking on Amazon recently and you can buy the water loss detectors that are like Bluetooth and will alert your phone. So even if you're not home, you could be like, oh no, go home and fix that. Putting pans under appliances
Mhm. And
was
that's
another one.
and
Sorry,
that's
go ahead.
everything, like the water heater too, but then also the fridge, and like anything else. You could do uh like a liner under the sink. I know you're going to get to that on the list, but even a liner under the sink will at least collect some amount of water before you have this whole like overflow situation. So that's all really all of those are really important and helpful.
Yes, and another thing like waterproofing your shower and replacing the caulking. I don't think people realize that caulk is not supposed to be there forever. It is not immortal. You have to remove it and replace it occasionally. And then buying the best appliances you can. So appliances more and more, they have their own water shut off features, especially with dishwashers and washers.
Yeah, really important to look for things like that. There's another thing that she talked about aside from, so those are appliances, those are things that you can do right now, whether you're building or not. If you are choosing to build, there are certain features that you probably want on your house or in your house, in your build, like a sloped roof, large overhang off of, of the roof over, to make sure that water is not able to come back and hit the actual house itself. Um, the sloped sills, sorry, the gutter, obviously, flashing, making sure that everything is covered, lots of like waterproofing and metal, and just everything that you can employ in normal building, that is specifically there for the protection of the home from water. You want to employ all of those if you can.
And then the last part of her talk was about building biology. And I found this very interesting. So it was a little bit more woo. It's less practical for like people who are trying to avoid mold, but just making your home a part of your environment and part of the nature around it. So like having that permeability through the walls so that your house can evaporate moisture, but also draw in clean air. And even like things like making sure the acoustic is good and having daylight and experiencing nature and like color and pattern. The way she ended her talk, it made me believe that she loves homes. Like she loves homes and she loves the experience of people being in a safe, clean, healthy environment for themselves. And so you can tell she's really passionate about this specifically.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that aspect of her talk actually, even though I'm not always a woo person. It does it resonates with me. You want a clean space, and by clean I mean clutter free and you know, with some amount of nature if you can safely have it inside, like plants. I know plants can be an issue sometimes with people with CIRS, but having, or at least being able to go out into nature, being surrounded in nature. I know a lot of us live in the city, so that can be difficult. But just those little elements, whatever you can bring into your life. I mean, even in the form of like wallpaper, you know, like anything that mimics nature and being, you know, getting back to that, because it's really, at the end of the day, a lot of these problems are from modern building practices. They are not from how we used to live hundreds of years ago in, or more than hundreds, I guess thousands of years ago, in you know, in tribal settings. Like I don't think we were dealing with mold in the same way back then, because it wasn't actively growing on a place that we never left, because we were always moving. So I think things like that are important to keep in mind for sure.
One of the last points of our talk was using natural building materials like clay, which kind of leads us perfectly into the next talk, was which is building my very own Sirewall by Ming Dooley.
Mhm.
But Paula's point on that was clay has a 15,000 year success rate. Like we've been building with clay for 15,000 years. And you can even like still see these structures that were built with clay that long ago,
Yeah,
which is kind of crazy. And they're mold free. So it's like, well, we did it right once. We can do it right again.
exactly. Yeah, that was awesome.
So the Sirewall by Ming
Yes.
Dooley. Ming Dooley is adorable. She got up on stage and she could not clear the podium. And I was just like, I love you. You are perfect. But she's just this like tiny woman who is tenacious and built her own Sirewall. So a Sirewall is compacted clay and dirt particulate, which they press with a hydraulic press, and then over time the actual like strength of that wall becomes stronger. And so Ming Dooley is building a home made out of this Sirewall material, and it was her going through the entirety of the process from working with Sirewall to find the composite of the dirt that they needed to have the strength capacity they needed for the environment that she had. You know, she told us about like how she was designing the home to have like passive temperature control. It was involved. And it made it feel really doable to me. And I know you have a different perspective on this, so I'll just share this really quickly. It was like, okay, if Ming Dooley can do this, I can do this. Because she's like, she's a DIYer. I think I lean more towards the DIY route. I have looked into like building my own tiny home. So building a tiny home out of Sirewall felt achievable to me, like it felt accessible to me. But I know you have a different opinion about this.
Yeah, I am just it looked like it was a lot, and I personally don't think I would trust myself to do it correctly. Like, and even though it wasn't hard, guys, I'm not trying to like make it sound like it was difficult. I think it was easy, or I should say it was simple to do. Like you do this and then you mix it this much water and then you wait and you mix it and then you like press it down and da da da. Like it was straightforward. But it was like also a lot of work. Special equipment was needed because it is a construction job. But it was so cool. It was really cool to watch her and her family come together and do this. And like they had a couple experts helping them along the way. I think the Sirewall people were also helping her. You know, and just so that it is absolutely doable for someone who wants to go that direction. I will happily pay extra for someone to do all that for me, though. That would be the direction I would go for sure.
And you can, if you reach out to Sirewall, they can either get you in touch with a general contractor in your area, or if you have a general contractor, they can work with them to train them on the Sirewall practices. So that's 100% an option as well. You don't have to be like Ming and I and be like, I'm going to build myself a house out of clay. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, it's really it's crazy how you could just use structural rammed earth stabilized by rebar, and it is just naturally modulates humidity. You don't have to use any wood or drywall in the building process, and it's naturally hydrophobic, so it repels water. It's just like it is a really perfect solution for somebody who is looking to build that kind of safe environment for themselves. I think she's making it's like a 12 by 12, like it's a small studio apartment type of little building that she's creating in New Mexico, I believe. So it's I mean, it'll be cool when it's done, but it was really cool that she documented it so well and presented it in that way.
And if you are like, absolutely not going to build my own house, I would like to buy one, please. The next talk is for you. Is by Jennifer Schrantz, who is married to Mike Schrantz, the remediator who you would have heard us talk about in previous CIRSx Recap episodes. But this one was called House Hunting Listers. I'm going to let Barbara take the lead on this one because I rent, and if I have any choice in the matter, will never be a homeowner. So I think Barbara was way more invested in this conversation than I was.
You know, I was first of all, can we just like appreciate what a dream team the Schrantzes are? Like an IEP and a realtor. It's just too perfect for words. And they both care about CIRS and CIRS patients.
It's like a
So
CIRS love story.
it's cute. I don't even think either of them have CIRS, do they? I haven't heard them talk about it, but
I would hope Mike doesn't at the very least. Or
yeah,
both, I hope both of them don't, because he would bring home like Actinos and stuff after checking
right.
out people's home. I hope neither of
Yeah.
them do. I hope no one has CIRS, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, the main so her presentation was fantastic, first of all. And her main point was, first of all, she lives in Tucson. So if you are in the Tucson area, you can use her. And why wouldn't you? I want to move to Tucson just so I can use her. Almost, but it's Tucson. It's no offense, but I'm such an
Wow.
asshole to places.
I literally grew up there, you guys. I think
Yeah.
Tucson's fine. I have nothing against Tucson. Florida
I
can
mean,
burn itself with fire, but Tucson's fine.
okay. Well, I'll take your, you know what? I haven't actually been to Tucson. I've only,
Wow.
so I can't even talk. I'm just not a fan of Southern Arizona. I've seen enough. We don't,
How how
we don't,
south have you been in Arizona?
Mesa?
Okay.
That's
Okay.
pretty,
I'll give it to you.
okay. I mean, when you compare to like Flagstaff and Sedona, okay, we don't need to talk about this. Anyway, if you're going to if you're going to be in Tucson, awesome, use her. However, she also has been collecting references for other realtors all around the country so that she can recommend other realtors to CIRS patients. So, and if you have a realtor that was fantastic and understanding and patient with you and your CIRS journey and finding a house, please tell us, and we'll make sure she knows. But either way, it's good to share those kinds of resources because they're few and far between. um Really important, get all of the inspections. That was a huge takeaway from this talk. Every inspection that you can, when you put an offer on a house and it gets accepted, there is a period of time, it's usually about 10 days, where you can get all of the tests done that you want, and you can still back out of the process without losing anything financially. You can request in your offer to have a longer period. She recommends at least 14 days rather than just 10. It's going to vary by state, so just work with your realtor on that. But you want to have the time to get the sewer scoped for endotoxin potential. You want to get the roof inspected. You want to check you want to have it, ideally an IEP come in and check for any water damage, any signs of mold or anything like that. You also would hopefully be able to do an ERMI or a Hertzme test, and that would involve the Swiffer test that you do like maybe on day one, and you pay extra to have the test turned around as quickly as possible so that you get those results as quickly as possible. Again, the point in doing all of this work up front during the inspection process is so you can make an educated decision about whether or not you actually want to move forward with the purchase of the home. So that's the main goal there. Of course, there are a couple other things you can do before you even put in the offer. For example, when you're looking for a home, if you have the ability and the luxury of going to this home, and this goes for renting too. If you go to the place that you want to live in and you can be there for an hour, you can actually take the VCS test there after you've been there for an hour and use your own body's stability or issues in taking that test to determine if that location is safe. So that's a really good one if you have the luxury of being able to hang out in a vacant home for an hour before you make any moves. But yeah, that was maybe most of what I have. Do you have any other?
Yeah, so one thing she said was, when you're doing the initial home search, there are things you can do to kind of refine for the homes that might be best for you. So she said the age of the building should be like 2 to 10 years old. Look at the materials it was built with, especially, when you're in Tucson, you do have those stucco houses. But is it in a environment where there were flood zones, or is it close proximity to like a sewage treatment center? Like those are things you can look into when you're actually searching for the home. She also said that new construction is probably okay for those without multi-chemical sensitivity. So I think VOCs are becoming a more known thing where people are being more intentional about the toxicity or lack thereof of the building materials and paints and stuff like that they're using. Um, the other thing she said that was really interesting to me is like you're going to have to understand what your tolerance level is and then figure out what you're not going to find a perfect home necessarily, but you can find a home that you feel safe in. And that's the point is like to find a home that you feel safe in. Is it good enough that you feel good about the remediation you're going to have to do after buying it? Or is it good enough that is your tolerance like, I absolutely do not want to remediate? That's going to change your approach to buying the home. So I thought that was a really interesting way for her to put it. She said, we aren't looking for perfect, we are looking for peace of mind. And I think that was the thing that stuck with me the most.
Yeah, the great points. And then I just realized I had a second page of notes. So I'm going to look at anything that was important that I didn't say before. You do want to avoid flips. So that's where someone has recently purchased a home and you can see the sales history of a home when you're buying it. If it was purchased in like 2 or 3 months ago and now it's being sold again and everything looks nice and new and different, well, a coat of paint will cover many manner of sins. So you want to avoid something that looks like it was recently just kind of remodeled, just because you won't be able to see the evidence of the water damage or mold growth or a lot of other things that they may have hidden. You do want to be aware of like weird smells, or if people are using a lot of like deodorizers, like an annoying, like give you a headache amount, they're probably covering something up. I have experienced that myself walking into a home that was for sale.
The combination of deodorizer and musty is like
Oh,
the worst. It's like you're not covering up anything, you're just making the situation infinitely worse.
yeah. It's pretty painful and it's obvious when you're looking for it. So that's why I'm saying it now. You'll be hopefully aware of that possibility. And some people, I mean, if you're sick and you're sensitive, you will notice regardless. Um, the list of inspections were just a regular home inspection, termite, roof, sewer, the sewer scope, an HVAC inspection, radon, microbial, which would be done by an IEP. So this is like the mold inspection. And then if it was built before 1978, you would want to look for lead and asbestos if you, let's say, have a popcorn ceiling. I do not.
Right.
I just checked.
When I was living in Florida, we were living in a house where the ceiling started to crack because we had some flooding in the backyard. It's just like series of unfortunate events. And when they looked into the ceiling, they found asbestos. So then I left that home to come to Colorado to dog sit. And then I ended up visiting my grandma in California who had just had flooding. And when they went to remediate, found that there was asbestos in the floor. It's like, oh my gosh, why was asbestos used in everything? Why?
Oh, it's awful, awful, awful. Yeah, get all of that checked. And when you make your offer, it can be contingent on inspections. So that can be again something, talk to your realtor. They should know how to do this. This should not be weird. This should be normal and easy for them. Um, Generally speaking, you want to avoid swamp coolers. These are now I'm just like throwing out random facts, but exactly what you said was, you're not looking for perfect, you're looking for peace of mind. I loved that too. And there are two episodes of Michael Schrantz's podcast that she cited as good resources that we'll put in the show notes. One is episode 25, which is buying a home. And that's where Mike and Jennifer talk about this. And you'll hear basically a lot of what I already just said, but probably in more detail on that one. And then there's episode 9 as well, which Michael has Dr. D on to talk about renting. So if that applies to you more, you can check out that episode. But I thought her presentation was so wonderful, and it's so rare. Like a realtor who knows about this is so rare that it's such a valuable perspective to get on this whole process for people, because I know so many people are like, screw remediation. I just want to find a better place to live. And so this would apply to you then, if that's the
And
case.
that was another really cool thing she said was like, if you're not in Tucson and you cannot use Jennifer Schrantz and you're not willing to move to Tucson so that you can work with Jennifer Schrantz. And if you do reach out to her and she doesn't have a recommendation for someone in your area, she said, find an experienced realtor who is compassionate, who can be patient with you, because you can teach someone about CIRS, but you can't teach someone to have empathy for your situation. And so if you find a realtor who has that empathy, and we talked about this a little bit in the remediation episode, if you can't find a CIRS literate remediator, find someone who's open to talking about it. And that's going to be like a really great, it's going to make your experience of remediation or house hunting that much better.
Yep, exactly. I feel like that was a good summary of those 3 talks. You're
Absolutely.
welcome, everyone.
You're welcome.
I'm patting myself on ourselves on the back. No, I was those were really great talks that I mean I weirdly love construction. Like why? I accidentally ended up in a real estate development job a few years back and really enjoyed learning about the process of construction, and I'm so thankful I did, because now I have context for all of this fun stuff.
I'm
Um,
glad one of us enjoys it.
it's a little bit, it's a lot. There's a lot of stuff, but it's cool to know what's going on in the building process and how to make it safe for you. I think knowledge is power, so it's good stuff.
1,000,000%. If you're looking for more resources and support on your CIRS journey, if you want to hear about how other people have found or created safe spaces for themselves to live, we do have a tiny house builder. He builds mold safe tiny houses. He's in our group and he just shares like all these different building practices, like things he incorporates when he's building these tiny homes. And it's so fascinating to me. So we have stuff like that over in the group. If you're interested, you can join us over at the CIRSgroup.com.
And otherwise, we will see you next week for another episode. See you then.
See you then.